No kid's Jewish education should end at 13. Adjerba offers Ontario high school credits infused with Jewish learning online for teens across the province. Ministry approved, intellectually demanding, Jewishly transformative. Adjerba.ca. Your teen belongs here.
This afternoon we will have 4 panels, so we have a very packed afternoon. Appearing by video conference from the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, please welcome Michael Levitt, President and Chief Executive Officer. At the table with us from the Jewish Federation of Edmonton, and in person, we have Stacey Levitt-Wright.
That's the sound of some witnesses being called to testify at Canada's Senate Committee on Human Rights, which for the past year was holding hearings studying antisemitism. You probably missed what happened, as Canada's upper house of parliament certainly gets less airtime than the raucous question period at the House of Commons. The senators held 8 meetings on antisemitism. 40-plus witnesses were called to testify. Nearly that same amount of briefs were submitted by people or lobby groups. The committee quietly wrapped up its public hearings on December 8th. Now, staffers and senators are drafting the report and the recommendations. They have to be finished by law by the end of 2026. The report will be non-binding on the government, but Montreal Senator Leo Housakos, who's also the leader of the Conservative opposition in the Senate and participated sometimes in the hearings, calls the crisis of antisemitism so urgent that it's driving people out of the country, and he wants the report completed much sooner. And while mainstream Jewish leaders did welcome the Senate's work and overall efforts, like Housakos, they also want the report to come out as soon as possible, especially after the recent Bondi Beach massacre in Australia, which happened just days after the Senate wrapped up its hearings. The House of Commons conducted its own study on antisemitism and published its findings in December 2024, just when the Senate started its work on the same topic. Many of the MPs' recommendations have since found their way into the federal Liberals' proposed Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act, which is still working its way through Parliament. But Senator Housakos thinks his colleagues in the Senate have a key advantage. They aren't dependent on pleasing electors, so they can tackle thorny topics impacting minorities. And he's confident the Senate's study on antisemitism will go further and recommend more measures to protect Canada's Jewish community.
Anti-Semitism right now has reached a level in this country which is unacceptable. It's reached a level where it's driving Canadians out of the country in terms of capital, human resources, people that have been here for generations that helped build this country. So this nonsense in our streets and in front of synagogues and in front of community organizations has to stop, and it has to stop now.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Friday, January 16th, 2026. Welcome to North Star, the flagship podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Now, our team here at the CJN's North Star podcast watched hours of the Senate committee's hearings, so you don't have to. And here are some interesting notes from our deep dive into their work. Number 1, while some of the witnesses represented government officials like Statistics Canada and the RCMP, most, or about 27, were pro-Israel or otherwise Zionist voices, mainstream Jewish community groups. These included university students, medical associations, legal advocates, Holocaust educators, and political lobby groups and human rights organizations, including CJA, B'nai B'rith, and the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal.
At the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, we believe that education is the most powerful antidote to hate. Each year, our organization provides educational workshops and programming to more than 40,000 school children across Canada, teaching them about the Holocaust, human rights, and the consequences of indifference. We also deliver training to tens of thousands of professionals, including teachers, public sector workers, police officers, equipping them with the knowledge and tools to recognize and respond to anti-Semitism and other forms of hate in their communities. These efforts are making a difference, but the challenge is growing faster than our collective response. As online platforms amplify hate speech and widely disseminate misinformation, and as global anti-Semitic movements find footholds here at home, we need greater investment in education and awareness.
Many argued Canada must do more to entrench the IRA definition of anti-Semitism in all parts of society, and they conflated criticism of Israel and the Israel-Gaza protests on the streets as leading to more anti-Semitism. The senators also invited a half dozen vocal critics of Israel to testify, like Independent Jewish Voices, the Ottawa Forum on Israel-Palestine, and Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, and some academics. Some downplayed the problem of anti-Semitism, saying it was really anti-Zionism and anti-Israel. They made the Gaza-Israel conflict central to the Senate committee's discussions. One said Jews actually perpetrated some of the hate crimes. Others demanded that Canada drop the current IRA definition of anti-Semitism, stop teaching Holocaust education as a standalone part of the curriculum, and argued that all the security for Jewish institutions hurts racialized and other minorities. Senator Leo Housakos, a pro-Israel Montrealer, opposed those views. He feels he has the responsibility to represent the voice of Canada's mainstream Jewish community at the Senate committee, as there are currently no Jewish senators on it. 4 of the 9 permanent committee members, including the chair, have either signed open letters critical of Israel's conduct in Gaza or spoken in the Senate against Israel's actions. Senator Housakos joins me from his office in Ottawa. We spoke just after the Senate had wrapped up its hearings in mid-December. Here's our conversation.
Great to be with you.
Well, thank you so much. We're speaking to you about the Senate's study on anti-Semitism. Just a few days after I personally spent hours at the seniors' residence in Toronto that you tweeted about, where the mezuzahs were stolen from up to could be 100 doors. And I saw your post about this. So it's a very active situation. And I'm wondering if you could help me by explaining to our listeners what the goal of this study is at the moment when all this stuff is going on in real time.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, to start sensitizing, we hope, the Canadian public of the ugliness that's going on in our streets, in our neighborhoods, amongst the group of people, just because of how they pray and who they pray and where they pray. Something that it's unbelievable in 2025 in Canada we're talking about and we have to do. The Senate as well is doing this study because we want to sensitize government on the crisis that we are facing. We are in the middle of a terrible crisis and we need action quickly to start protecting our Jewish community. Simple as that. And it's sad that a parliamentarian in 2025 has to call action and has to call on the government to take action to protect the Jewish community, a community that has done so much for this country.
Senator, the Parliament, you mentioned, but the House of Commons did a study like this and basically said many of the same things many people, including yourself, just said. So I'm wondering, how would the Senate study maybe be any different or move things forward? Or is it maybe, as some people say, just a waste of time? And I don't want to upset you about this,
right.
but I have heard this.
Look, Parliament of Canada, many Canadians don't realize it's 2 chambers. It's the elected House of Commons and it's the appointed upper chamber as well, known as the Senate. And more often than not, I will say that the studies that have been done by the Senate in the past have proven to be more in depth, have proven to be more substantive than any study or many of the studies that are done over in the House of Commons. And I wouldn't be surprised that will be the outcome of this study. I'll tell you from my point of view, what I'm hoping we can achieve in the Senate, which clearly they haven't achieved yet over on the House side, is come back with tangible recommendations that will help address the problem.
Well, they gave a lot of recommendations. I remember reading the other chamber's report. And now we're talking about Bill C-9. I'm sure that's part of it. The Prime Minister himself mentioned it at the Hanukkah party on the Hill on Monday night, saying it's directly because of what's happening to Canada's Jewish community. I know your party doesn't support C-9, but yeah.
And look, C-9 is coming back to this to the Senate as well from the House of Commons. We're going to give it a thorough, sober second thought and a review as well. I'm going to have an open mind regardless of what the party position is on the other side. We have to be clear, though, that this is Canada. Freedom of speech is essential and important, beyond important. Without freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of expression, none of these things that are so essential to our democracy will continue to flourish. So, but having said that, I've also been a proponent that says freedom of expression has its limitations when it comes to hate.
I want to ask you personally what you think your particular role in this new committee is, because there are no Jewish senators on the actual board of it itself. So could you sort of share how you see your role?
Look, I take my responsibility as a senator very serious. Those that have seen me here serve over the last 17 years. I serve my constituents of Quebec and particularly the region of Montreal with enthusiasm and with a lot of energy. The Jewish community is an important community for me. It's a community I grew up in Chambly-Laval. Now I live in Ville-Saint-Laurent. Unfortunately, many of the members of the Jewish community in Ville-Saint-Laurent have left for other places, like yourself, for example.
Not fair. I left in 1979.
Well,
that was different.
Well, we still miss you.
And I came back. So,
and we'd like you to come back and visit more. But look, for me, I consider myself an honorary member of the community. I stand by it. And it's done so much for my country, for our province, for our city. Without the Jewish community, the city of Montreal wouldn't be what it is today.
Right. But on the Senate, so let's say you're wearing that mantle as you sit in the Senate committee for this stuff you're going to hear. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely. I feel that I'm a voice for the community on this committee. I also happen to be the leader of the official opposition, the Conservative caucus in the Senate. Everybody knows that the Conservative Party has been unequivocal in support of Israel and the Jewish community in fighting anti-Semitism.
So we're going to go through some of the things that were said during testimony. I'm wondering, can you explain how witnesses are selected or invited?
Yeah, they're chosen by steering. Every Senate committee, like in the House of Commons as well, every parliamentary committee has a steering committee. At the beginning of Parliament, will elect a chair of the committee, a deputy chair, and 2 other steering members. They are the ones that coordinate the agenda of the committee in terms of scheduling witnesses that want to come before the committee. I can tell you in the Senate, the practice we have is it's very rare for witnesses that approach the committee in regards to a study who want to come and present that they would not be allowed. There would have to be a really good reason. We pride ourselves on the fact that we're a place that gives voice to people that otherwise might not have been heard, particularly over on the House side. That's one of the benefits of having the Senate and 2 chambers, where we actually do a lot of lockstep work on issues, and some people might find it redundant, but the truth of the matter is it gives an opportunity for everyone to be heard. So very often people will raise their hand and they'll come before the committee. Very often those steering will identify witnesses that they want to believe they'll have something to contribute to the study. So sometimes it's a 50-50 equation. Sometimes the steering members will choose 80% of the witnesses because there might be less interest or whatever the case may be.
Our listeners, I'm going to put the links to see some of the anti-Israel people who are being heard or giving briefs. And some of the things they're saying is very concerning, such as decentralize or despecialize Holocaust education. Don't make it special, and don't make anti-Semitism special. It should be with anti-Palestinian racism. Israeli soldiers are raping Palestinian prisoners and all this stuff. When you hear these things or read these things, what should we make of this? When it's about anti-Semitism, it's not about anti-Palestinian or Islamophobia. We already did a study on that. So I'm just wondering, can you help me with this?
Look, I was not thrilled by all the witnesses that steering and the committee chose to be heard. There were a number of witnesses that particularly bothered me. You're absolutely right. There was an attempt by some of them to equate Zionism and anti-Israel as being a correct geopolitical position. and without understanding that being anti-Zionist and being anti-Israel, particularly in today's context, is basically a prerequisite, as far as I'm concerned, to be an effective anti-Semite. We heard witnesses come before the committee who said that anybody who supports the state of Israel should be destroyed.
Now, Mr. Rabbi Mifasser, if I may ask you a simple question. You posted on February 18, 2024, that organizations supporting Israel deserve to be, and I quote, destroyed. Do you still stand by that quote?
10 seconds. So do you want to put that to second round, Senator Housakos?
I think it warrants an answer, so maybe we can give him more than 10 seconds to answer, and I think colleagues will agree that this particular quote deserves clarification.
I'll allow that. Go ahead, please.
Rabbi.
Yeah. Well, considering that Israel is conducting a genocide, pushing Palestinians off their land, killing them every day, I do believe that organizations that support that state should be destroyed. They should not function. And being anti-Israel is not being anti-Semitic. You started your comments by saying that we're in the wrong committee. So let's talk about anti-Semitism instead of talking about what you just brought up, which is being anti-Israel. I stand on myself being anti-Israel. I lived there for 4 years. I read, speak, and write Hebrew. I read Israeli newspapers in Hebrew every day. And I'm anti-Israel. I have no problem saying that in a Senate committee. More and more of us need to say that.
Your comments were inflammatory. Your comments were inflammatory. It doesn't matter if you speak Hebrew, French, English, or whatever. In Canada, those kind of comments are unacceptable, and those are the kind of comments that fuel hatred, fire bombings of synagogues.
That is
and
enough.
other
That is
violent
time,
activities.
Senator Housakos.
It was shameful that that individual was allowed to come before a Senate committee of Canada, Parliament of Canada. And it was shameful that he expressed himself like that. And the chair did not take measures to address that and to mitigate that. Believe me, I've made that point in public. I also made that point in private with fellow members of the committee. And hopefully that will be also reflected and addressed in the report. So I believe we heard enough. I think everyone had a perspective to voice their opinion on the matter. My concern right now is to make sure that the report reflects the testimony and that it has strong recommendations coming out of it. And it is something that the government will embrace. That's the objective when it's all said and done, and address the issue. Like I said, anti-Semitism right now has reached a level in this country which is unacceptable. It's reached a level where it's driving Canadians out of the country in terms of capital, human resources, people that have been here for generations that helped build this country. So this nonsense in our streets and in front of synagogues and in front of community organizations has to stop, and it has to stop now.
Senator, the mandate, though, of this study, the deadline when it has to be handed in is December of 2026. Are you in favor of speeding things up, or is it going to be speeded up?
Oh, look, I think the deadline is just a benchmark. I believe the study will be made public way in advance of that. Again, there's so much I can share right now in this interview because we are in-camera meetings in the preparatory stage of drafting the report and so on and so forth. And these are in-camera deliberations. So that's why I'm also a little bit careful of what I can share or cannot. But I can tell you that our target is to come out with a public report way before the fall of this year.
Okay.
Look, there are elements, there's testimony that I didn't agree with. Obviously, my position is clear. Everybody knows where I stand on this. There's some witnesses I would have preferred they weren't there. But once this report is all said and done, at least I can assure you one thing, those witnesses will be able to say they were heard, right? I guess that's the one benefit. I and you might not like the perspective they shared with the committee, But at least once we publish this report, there won't be individuals saying, well, we want it to be heard and our position to be articulated, and we were prevented from being heard.
Which is bad optics, as I assure.
Yeah.
So,
well, look, I guess the benefit of that is we saw some anti-Semitism in action before this committee. So no one can repudiate the fact that it is alive, it's organized, it is everywhere, including coming and articulating those points of views before parliamentary committees, and we need to address it. We need to address this evil. It's interesting. I had a professor from University of Athens who was here this week visiting me on another subject. So in the course of the conversation, he says to me, I haven't been to Canada for a very long time. And in the few days that I'm here, it's evident to me this country has changed so much from the last time I was here 15, 20 years ago. I reluctantly acknowledged, and I said, yes, we have a problem. Canada has become a Motel 8 and an ATM machine for anti-Semites, the Muslim Brotherhood, and coordinated and funded very often by nefarious states like Beijing and Iran and Turkey and even Russia, of course, that are participating happily in misinformation, disinformation, and trying to disrupt our democracies and our social peace in what was once upon a time a pluralistic, multicultural, multi-faith, but united Canada.
One thing I wanted to ask you before we end, a lot of the people who testified in favor of, say, watering down the problem and focusing on Palestinian rights said things like, you need to focus on the, extreme right wing, the Proud Boys type of people, the Nick Fuentes people, as you were mentioning. And I'm wondering if that is something you agree with. And they said, we're not the problem.
Look,
because we don't kill anybody. It's the right wing that actually kill people. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Look, we all know, all of us that are fighting anti-Semitism, we all know that the left has been co-opted by all of these nefarious nations I just highlighted before. And they've turned the left the vehicle which all these nefarious forces are using to conduct their propaganda in favor of anti-Semitism. I'm not saying we don't have a problem of right-wing extremism. Extremism should be fought on all angles, in all fields, in all places on the spectrum. But there is no doubt right now that the driving force, the leaders when it comes to anti-Semitism, are coming from the left. It's being perpetuated as well, and I say it with sadness, by our own government that recognized Palestine, a state that has never existed, has never had borders, and is a mythical invention of people, unfortunately, searching for a territory that doesn't belong to them. And also are being used by the Muslim Brotherhood and other organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah in order to carry out their only one goal, and that's the destruction of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And when our government recognizes the state of Palestine, it emboldens them. When our government recognizes and embraces the decision of the International Court of Justice, and there's many senators here appointed by Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government who are constantly perpetuating that agenda as well. And we have at least one on the committee and others in the Senate chamber. So, and it goes back to the point I've been making for a long time, how badly infiltrated Canada is by foreign players who are not here with good intentions whatsoever. They want to cause social disruptions into our social peace. They want to disrupt our democracy, and they want to infiltrate our political discourse with some of the ugliest things like anti-Semitism, which I thought was just something I read about in books of a past era. And here we are in 2025 in Canada, and we're facing the same challenge. It's ludicrous.
Senator, do you want to tell me and our listeners what you would like to see in this report, going back to the report that's being written, your personal top few things that you make sure that you want it in there?
Number one, I want to make sure the definition of anti-Semitism is that was established by the IHRA And I want to make sure, because there have been some attempts to redefine anti-Semitism, and the point I'm going to make very vigorously, that's not the objective here. The objective is to embrace the definition of anti-Semitism that we all know what it is. Second thing, I want to see a whole of government approach to dealing with what is a national crisis. I want to make sure that what coming out of this, the number one recommendation is take that ombudsman that has supposedly been created in order to fight anti-Semitism. We're still waiting to see if it's going to be that individual will be appointed, but put teeth to that individual and then coordinate public safety, Justice Department, RCMP, CSIS, create a whole of government approach where they're all aligned, they're all working with a special task force with concerted benchmarks, dates, targets of how to fight anti-Semitism. The other thing is I want to make sure the element of foreign interference that is the driving force that's funding anti-Semitism is something that once and for all we start attacking. We passed the foreign registry in this country 539 days ago. The government still has not put it into place. It's not active. Imagine, I think it was voted on in June of 2024. The government said it would be in place no later than by the end of 2024 or at the end of 2025. And all I'm getting from the government leader in the Senate is soon. And clearly his definition of soon seems to be in years. Mm-hmm. So that also in the report has to be addressed. And I don't believe the foreign registry is enough when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism. I think we need to highlight and name Hamas, Hezbollah, Samadoun, and other organizations. And in the recommendation say it's also unacceptable to Samadoun, after a year having been put on the list of terrorist organizations, they're still receiving tax credits in this country. They're still a non-for-profit organization recognized by CRA. It's stuff of this nature which shows the level of hypocrisy on the part of the Carney government and the previous Trudeau government in fighting anti-Semitism. And if these type of recommendations are not implemented with, like I said, a whole government approach, and also what I want to see is the political will, starting from the prime minister all the way through the cabinet, down, have a first minister's meeting about this with premiers, call municipal officials around the table.
They had one in March. They had one in 2021 as well.
That was 4 years ago.
Yeah, but they had one in March this year. They had a whole forum on it. So yeah,
with municipal leaders.
Some,
yeah,
not very many. Mostly policing. It was mostly policing and justice. Yeah,
Ms. Besner, what I'm talking about is compel the mayors to come to Ottawa to sit down with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Infrastructure. And when I say the Minister of Infrastructure, you know what I'm talking. I'm sending a message.
Carrots and sticks, right.
Exactly. If I was the Prime Minister, I'd say to these mayors, if you don't start showing a political will to clean up your cities, there's the Minister of Infrastructure, there'll be consequences to pay. So that's called political will. Not navel gazing, not photo ops, not going to synagogues and selling us stories without any and laws without any teeth and political gestures without any commitments. I'm talking about tangible stuff. So I'd like to see that in the report. I'd like to put the government on notice that this report is telling you here is the path forward, and we'll be able in 3 months, 6 months, a year to validate if you're really doing it or not.
I really appreciate you coming on the CJN's North Star podcast. Our listeners are fascinated by this topic, and I appreciate your time. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounded like for this episode of North Star, sponsored by Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin's Charitable Foundation. We did ask the chair of the Senate committee, Senator Paulette Sr., for an interview. She declined until after the report comes out. And the same was true for Senator David Arnott, who's the one who pushed for this committee to resume its anti-Semitism work after the study got interrupted after just 2 meetings when Justin Trudeau stepped down as leader and prime minister. You can watch and read all the Senate's work yourselves. If you're interested, we put the links in our show notes. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Hoffman. The executive producer is Michael Freeman, and Alicia Richler is the CJN's editorial director. Let us know your thoughts on this one. We're at info@thecjn.ca. And thanks for listening.